Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Drafted Pages podcast. Really excited about this episode today. Have a little bit of a special feature once again. Similarly, the way I did Mother's Day, I invited my dad to come on for Father's Day this week and give some fatherly advice, have some good conversations with him, and hope you all get to enjoy a lot of his wisdom that he has to share. So, with that, Dad, pass off to you. How about you introduce yourself to everyone?
Well, hello everybody. My name is Ed, and last name same as Nick's, Chroscinski. Happy to be here and happy to be a part of the podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited we were able to do this, Dad. Um, you know, Soon I'll actually be up there in Pennsylvania for some time, and we'll be able to do this a little bit more often in a little bit better environment. But for the time being, it's great to be able to connect virtually and do all this. So
Absolutely.
we have a fun way to start off this episode, and yeah, my dad and I are huge movie buffs. I get a lot of my cultural influence from him and growing up, and I thought it'd be really cool for us to do a movie draft, basically of the top franchises of all time. Basically, the only rule we set for this was that there had to be at least three movies for it to be considered a franchise. And we're just going to go back and forth like a draft and just draft our top five movie franchises, no repeats or anything like that. So, Dad, I will let you have this first overall pick in the movie franchise draft.
Okay, let me just say before I throw that out there, when Nick first proposed this, I thought this was going to be really easy to do. This was really hard. There are a lot of movie franchises out there that I really, really like. As Nick said, we're pretty big movie buffs. So this was really hard. I ended up making a list of actually over 20 movie franchises. And then I broke them into fives, figuring, okay, I'm going to go and, based on what you say, etc. But having said that, at the top of the list, movie franchises for me. I know it doesn't appeal to everybody, but for me, is the Lord of the Rings. And let's not we're not counting those three Hobbit movies. Forget that they're out. Okay, the Lord of the Rings, just the scope, the magnitude of the movies, everything that Peter Jackson did. Keeping all the actors there on set for well, actually they were in New Zealand. While he filmed all three movies, so that he had them all in one spot, get them done, get all the movies done, and to win 17 Oscars out of 30 nominations, no cursing, no nudity. It's just from start to finish, just the best franchise out there, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I mean, I figured you were taking that one overall. If you weren't, I was. Like you said, it's timeless, it's classic, it's never gonna. It's one of those that's up there in the top three with probably most people's films of all time. So yeah, you can't argue that number one overall. So for my first round pick, I don't love it, but I feel like I have to take it in the first round. I can't let you get Lord of the Rings and this, so I'm taking Star Wars. Just another absolute classic, amazing world building franchise, very unique in that sense. And you get all the lightsabers, you get all of the stuff at Disney with it. There's a lot to unpack there. I know everybody's got their favorite kind of in that timeline, and kind of the same way you threw out the Hobbit movies, I might throw out those last three. But there has been some good remakes, like Rogue One, for example, is actually one of my favorite Star Wars movies, and that's come out, in the past recent years, not part of that original trilogy or original six. So, yeah, I'm taking Star Wars with my first round.
okay, well, Star Wars was on my list, so congrats. Um, I'm gonna have to then move into the MCU and take the Marvel universe. Just again, the scope, the magnitude. I'm not wowed by the second version yet, but they still have time. But we've talked before. Endgame, I think, really got shafted by the Academy. When you look at Endgame, it had everything that the Academy wants. It had drama, it had tears, it had laughter, it had strong women characters, strong minority characters. Anything that you could want in a movie was in Endgame. So I thought that was a great way for them to end the first kind of series in the MCU. So yeah, so I'll throw out MCU as my second pick.
Yeah, that's a great second round selection. You get a lot of variety there, and hopefully they can capitalize on the second half of the second real big phase of it and make it kind of have that final touch that the last few films had in that Endgame Infinity War era. So yeah, it's a great pick. Also on my list. So we're both going through most of them. I figured most of them would be the same, so considering the fact we like a lot of the same movies and things like that. But with my second rounder, again, this is going to be a popular fan favorite, just a great world building franchise. I'm going with Harry Potter. Um, I think it's just a classic. You can watch it at any age, any time. You're still going to enjoy it. Yes, the first two movies are kind of bland and boring, and when you watch it as an adult, you're like, man, these kids, they're so frustrating. But Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, um, what's the fifth one? I can't remember. Order of the Phoenix, and then the Deathly Hollows to close it out. Like, I think it's really well done. It's timeless. It's based on books that are really good that I haven't read all of them, but just yeah, another great movie franchise. Taking that in the second round.
Alrighty. So for my third round, I'm going the Mission Impossible route. I just think that I thought the first one was phenomenal. The second one, and was second and third one. The third one, and then they started ratcheting it up again. You went, to Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation, and it's been ratcheting up, and the intensity has been really ratcheting up in all the movies since then. I'm really looking forward to the final chapter, as it was, at least that's what they're saying. The first, it's a two-parter, so we'll see how they do. But yeah, I went Mission Impossible for my third pick.
Yeah, and I just finished up all of those movies, rewatching all of them. So that's a great third round. I think you get a lot of good quality there with that third round pick. Definitely going to be a starter in your top five. So with my third rounder, this might be a little bit of a reach at three, but it's something I have to have on my team, and I would be really upset if you got it the next pick. So I'm going Pirates of the Caribbean. I think Jack Sparrow is one of the most iconic characters in the past 20 years. Johnny Depp just owns that role. Those first three movies are really good. Got great villains in it as well. And then the past couple have come out, have been really good. I'm hoping that after the whole scandal and everything kind of is down now and by the wayside, and Disney kind of wants to bring him back. And like we've always said, you can't not have Jack in it and it be a Pirates movie, right? Like he is that the same way Tony Stark is Iron Man, right? So in a way that the MCU kind of died with Iron Man, if they make more Pirates movies without Johnny Depp, we're probably going to be the same sort
Yeah,
of feel to it. So
not going to work.
I'm taking them with my third rounder.
Okay, so fourth round. I, for the record, I had Pirates, did not make my top five, just missed the cut. But it was right there. It was number 6 on my list. So at number 4, I went Bond, James Bond. I just think, I grew up in the era with Roger Moore and had to listen to my dad tell me how bad he was compared to Sean Connery. And we got into arguments all the time because he was a Sean Connery guy. I was a Roger Moore guy because that's who I grew up with. But having watched them all multiple times now, I think Roger Craig elevated James Bond to a whole nother level. I just think it was just he epitomized everything about James Bond. And, I get it. He wanted out. Okay. You can only do that for so long. So it'd be really curious to see. I mean, there's so many names are being thrown out there as who the next James Bond's going to be. So we'll see who it is. But the franchise just lives forever. I mean, it started in the 60s and here we are in the 2020s and we're still making James Bond movies and they're still popular and they still, audiences flock to it. So I had to go with Bond as my fourth pick.
Yep, Bond. Bond was also here on my list. I think, like you said, it's timeless. It's great. It's going to be around forever. You can tell the story 18 different ways, and it's just gotten better and better as the years have gone on. So that's a great pick. With mine, I'm also going with a franchise that has some 60s, 80s movies, and the modern day movies I think are some of the best ever. And I'm going with the Batman franchise. Specifically that Christopher Nolan era of The Dark Knight. I think The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger is undisputably one of the top films ever made, and The newest one with Pattinson, I think is also really good. Different take on Batman. So I'm excited to see how they go through that franchise and tell the story of Batman through that way. And I just think you get a lot of variety. You get the old cheesy cartoon stuff with it that I watched a little bit as a kid, but the modern day Batman films I think are amazing. So I'm happy with them at 4.
Okay, so for my last pick, now as I said, I had Pirates at 6 only because I knew you were probably going to pick Pirates. Okay, then I went back and forth over these two, and I know my fifth pick is not going to relate to many people. I don't ask me why. I have no idea why. I love these movies. Okay, they just I watch them every time they're on. I have them right there in my collection. So my fifth and final pick, I'm going with the Underworld series. The vampires and the Lycans, Selena is the death dealer, and all of that. I love them. Watch them. I love when they run them from beginning to end. Just like they do with Harry Potter and things. Yeah, if they're on, I'm watching them. So there you go. That's my number 5 pick.
Yeah, that's a good choice. I know you really like those films. I don't think I've seen. I may have seen the first one. I definitely haven't seen all of them. But yeah, like your list, your top 5. So good pick there. With my fifth one, I've gone back and forth on this whole time, looking at my list on what I would really take at 5. And this might be a little bit of a recency bias because I just finished this franchise again a couple months ago. But I'm going the Bourne movies. You took Impossible and Bond. I feel like I got to get a spy movie in there. I think Matt Damon crushes that role. I think they're really unique. We're almost ahead of their time in that way, and really make you think. Like I just rewatched them, and I remember how they go for the most part, but there were still points in the movie where I was like, "Oh, I forgot about that." Like that was a nice little twist, and he's just a great character. And then you have the one with James Renner in it as well. So classic movies, always throw them on. You're gonna have a fun time watching them. You're not gonna be disappointed. So that'll round out our franchise draft here.
All right. Well, let me just rattle something off for you. Okay.
Yeah.
The one I want that almost made it for me that didn't with Underworld was the Indiana Jones series.
So that's your honorable mention is the
Yeah,
Indiana Jones
yeah,
just missed.
and I just wanted to say, since we're talking about it, I said this was really hard. Okay, you've got Die Hard, Fast and Furious, The Aliens, Jurassic stuff, Rocky, Transformers, John Wick, Terminator series, X-Men, Matrix. There's just so many good franchise sequences out there. It just the list was really hard to narrow it down to 5. But those are my 5, and I'm sticking with them.
Yeah, I mean those are great. Yeah, and you mentioned it. Transformers would have been my honorable mention that just missed the cut there. But yeah, you had Ocean's movies. You have the Godfather trilogy,
Yep.
the Expendables trilogy. I even wrote down the Mighty Ducks as a sports one. The Halloween films, Planet of the Apes. Like same thing. When I was going through this, it was like, okay, this is easy. Like list out like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, all that stuff right at the top, and then you keep digging, and you're like, man, there are so many franchises. Like this is hard to pick from. So let us
Next,
know which ones that we missed, which ones should have been in your top 5, and who won? Who won the draft? After all, we'll put the names up there. But yeah, definitely grew up watching a ton of movies and still love watching them. So it's a good time for sure. So, well, transitioning to a little bit more serious stuff, getting into more like fatherly advice after that. First off, I'll ask you that as we give it a little bit of a warm up question. Lord of the Rings is my favorite franchise of all time. It's my favorite films. I have tons of action figures still. I mean, I have the Legolas cutout in my room for crying out loud. I think we did it. I was like 5 years old when the Fellowship came out. And what age would you say you could introduce your son to Lord of the Rings?
with the movies
Yeah,
or the book?
the movies. What age do you think you could sit down and show your kid the Fellowship?
That's a tough one. There's no cursing in it. There's no nudity. Obviously, there's some violent scenes. throughout the movies. So you know you have to be careful with that. So that's a tough call to say what is the proper age. I think you have to play that kind of by ear. You have to know your child. You have to know their maturity level. What can they handle? What can't they? I mean, the thought is, oh, there's nothing really bad here. Let's introduce this early. Okay. And I remember, you know, of course, reading The Hobbit to you at an early age, just reading you the book. And we had the picture book, so I could show you pictures every now and then. You know, it had some pictures in it. But and that was at an early age, and I think that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But I think you probably to err on the side of caution just because of the violence in it, and we tend to, as a society, downplay the violence that occurs every day. We see so much of it every day, and so we almost become numb to it at times. So from that regard, I would probably lean towards that, you know, 12 to 13, 12 to 14 years of age. And if the child really had just a maturity about them, maybe 10 to 11, but I would not personally do it any sooner than that.
Yeah. Yet I don't think they would appreciate it as much either before then, right? It's kids when you're growing up, it's very easy to get distracted, or you just kind of need the basic level stuff. And the storytelling in Lord of the Rings is pretty in depth if you really pay attention and listen to the dialogue and things like that. So yeah, I think that's a good age for it. I was just curious, right? What you would do now, knowing everything we know. So is that as kind of a softball question to warm up? Ask you the same question I asked Mom. What was the first year of fatherhood like for you? The very first year.
It's it's full of highs and lows. You know, it's I know Mom said it, and I've said it a million times. You can read all the books you want. You can get all the advice you want from people who have had children. Until you have your own and you're living through it, there's nothing gets you ready for it. There's just sleep deprivation. You know, you have to get up and you have to still go to work. Now it's a little different. Okay. Now there's paternity leaves and maternity leaves that didn't exist, or at least weren't as common when you guys were born. So, you know, you're born, you take a few days off. You get a few days off for the birth of a child. I think we got 3 days off for the birth of a
That's it?
child.
Just
Yeah.
3 days?
Yeah. And then you're back to work, you know? And it's tough because you're not getting a whole lot of sleep. And it was really hard for me. I know Mom used to worry quite a bit because I had a 1 hour drive to work because I was working out in Lancaster County. So I had to truck on all over there every day. So it was tough, but just, you know, having, you know, you there, you know, it's just that, you know, you brought a new life into the world, and now, you know, now everything that comes with it, you know, unless you're going to be a helicopter parent and just disappear, you know. But once that little baby's there, now there's a commitment from start to finish. I mean, you know it. You're on your own. You've graduated. You got your MBA, and you're there in Texas. But we're still talking to you. We still are supporting you. You know, we're still trying to help you when and where we can. So, you know. Yeah, you've flown the coop, but you're still part of the family. So, and of course, there's always Thanksgiving. So, you know,
Always Thanksgiving. Yeah.
yeah,
That's a whole other episode we should do with the whole family
yeah,
when
that
that
would be
time
a good
rolls
one.
around. Yeah, that'd be a great time. But speaking of flying away and, you know, leaving the nest, I talked with Mom about this as well. But now that kind of officially this was your first year, you and Mom there at the house of empty nesters, right? Like Lexi officially at grad school, away from Pennsylvania. I've been away for a while. Matt, Rachel, and Joel have been out for a while. So this was kind of like the first year of just you and Mom and the dog. So how does that compare to the first year of being a father?
So, for me, it's different. Okay, and Lexi has asked me this as well. I want you guys to be out there on your own. I want you to live your lives, to experience things. It, you can't you can reach out to your parents for advice. You can reach out for, as you started out, with some fatherly wisdom. Okay. But until you go through all these things, until you do it by yourself, it's really hard to gain the perspective that you need. I listened to your podcast last week, and just an amazing podcast last week of how you've grown, how you've matured, how the things you've gone through have, made you who you are today. Okay. So for me, I want you guys, I miss you. Okay. But I'm glad, I'm happy that you guys are out there on your own. And I don't worry about the distance. I always tell mom that's what planes, trains, and automobiles are for. Okay. It's like wherever you end up, wherever you decide to settle down, if we're close, we're close. If we're not, hey, hop on a plane, hop on a train, whatever we need to do to get close. So that's the way I approach that.
Yeah, I mean that the whole idea of getting compound in North Carolina and just all being neighbors, with the way the economy's going, that sounds like an even better idea, like with each passing year, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm sure it's a lot different from a father's perspective than a mother's perspective, and I've definitely seen that with you and mom. But that's great. That's why you guys complement each other really well, yin and yang. And one of the reasons why you guys are my heroes in life. You guys have really just been great examples of how to live almost like close to a perfect life as you can. And one of the things I really admire in you guys is your marriage. And I wanted to ask you, before you're a father, before you have kids, you hopefully get married, right? Or if not, seriously dating somebody at the time. So for you, what are like serious qualities that you look for in a spouse and trying to find a wife, for anybody out there who is kind of navigating that field?
So I'll go back to my days as a teacher. And, I loved discussing things with the students. I loved when they would come to my office and just come in and chat about everyday things. Okay. And specifically with the seniors, I used to talk to them all the time. And I remember a discussion a student had with me one time. And I said to him, so what you have to ask yourself is, what happens when the sex is gone? Okay. Granted, sex is a big part of any, serious committed relationship. There's a closeness there. And I'm not just talking about, the physicalness of it, but it's just an emotional, spiritual thing when you really love somebody and you're having sex with them. But it's a really short period of time. I mean, it's a microcosm of the relationship. And what I told him is, what are you going to do when you're sitting across the table eating dinner with them and there's no kids, there's just the two of you? What are you going to talk about? And I'm not talking about earth-shattering events that make the news. I'm talking about, how do you talk about the everyday, the mundane, the stuff that falls into a rut? How do you get out of that rut? If you can't have those kinds of conversations with the person across the table from you, why are you with that person? Because you have to be able to have those conversations. You have to be able to talk to that person. So that's where I go with it. The whole compatibility stuff. I tell people, if you're with somebody and there's something you really, really don't like, and you think you're going to change it, that ain't going to happen. Okay. The only person who can change themselves is that person. And you're a testament to that. Okay. Change comes from within. It doesn't come from outside. And, if you don't want to change, it's not going to happen. And what I have seen in my experience, not with me and mom, but with other couples that I know, somebody does something that they really don't want to do. It's not who they are. It's not who they want to be, but they do it to make the other person happy. All it does is fester. It just sits there under the surface, simmering, and just waiting for that trigger point, whenever it may be, whether it's 1 year from now, whether it's 20 years from now, and it just completely blows up, and it's just a disaster, because they forced themselves into a box that really they didn't want to go into. So don't try to change somebody. Don't be afraid to say, hey, you know, it's it's been great, but it's just not it's not the way it's not what we want. It's not going to work in the long run. And better to find that out, better to make that decision early than after there's a house, after there's kids, and you go through all that trauma that just adds to it. Breaking up is never easy. It's an old cliche. Okay, it hurts. But it hurts a lot less when there's no kids and there's no house and there's no assets to divide and things like that. It tends to go a little bit easier.
Yeah, and that's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. But I think a lot of that also ties into knowing yourself, right? Knowing what you want in a partner and how you operate and things you need to complement you. And I think that, like you said, when you're at the dinner table, right, you have to be able to talk about stuff. And I think you have to find someone that challenges you, right? Like at least a
Yeah.
little bit in that way.
Yeah. You what I would say is don't have a checklist. Okay. Don't make well, my spouse has to have this, they have to have that. Okay, because that's the odds of making the checklist happen are slim and none. Okay. What I find is that there has to be obviously a physical attraction between two people initially. That's what draws you together because you don't know that person. But hey, he's a cute guy, she's a cute girl, let's go out for coffee, whatever. Okay. There's something that brings you together, but it's that physical attraction initially. And then you start talking to that person and you find out, hey, maybe we share some commonality here. Let's, see where this leads. And, so you start dating. And through the dating process, you start to learn more about each other. And, as you point out, what you like, what you dislike. And you don't always, folks, you don't always have to agree on every single thing. Like you said, you can challenge each other, you can push each other, you can agree to disagree for Pete's sake. Okay. It's not the end of the world just because you don't see eye to eye on every issue. That should not be a deal breaker. Okay. But yeah, you want to be able to bounce things off of the other person. And, you're not always going to get the response you want. Okay. But it shouldn't be the end of the relationship just because you don't agree on every issue.
That can be applied to any relationship, not just romantically. Like just because you don't
It's true.
agree doesn't mean it has to all end in tears and arguing.
Well, to me, that's a big problem with the world today. Too many people can't agree to disagree and still be friends. It's like we have to hate the other person because they don't have the same view as we do. Okay. And I just, as a society, we seem to have lost the ability to do that, to just say, hey, we have different opinions. So what? Who cares?
That's what makes so many places great, right? It's the difference of opinions, it's the challenging of different viewpoints that create, it's the hardening of a diamond, right? Under pressure, under all of that comes greatness, comes beauty,
Right.
right? So, yeah, I completely agree that society has really lost its way when it comes to that topic and issue. So, you mentioned being a teacher. Obviously, you were also a coach for a long time. You were my coach for great many years. And those, in a way, are fatherly roles. You're mentoring young kids, you're helping them, whether it's learn a sport, learn a subject, learn different walks in life, different skills that they need. Can you speak on that a little bit and maybe, one or two instances that brought you a lot of joy or if you had a favorite, whether it was teaching or coaching, was it coaching me? Was it not coaching me? Like coaching another group of kids?
All right. So they are similar teaching because at least for me, they were similar. Let's put it that way. Because my role as a teacher, so let me just clarify that I taught 4 years at a local college, and I was in the science is a lot of the kids that I taught either wanted to be veterinarians or go into research or laboratory field, something like that. And I really believed that it was my job to coach them, not just to show up and teach them what I was hired to teach them, but to get them ready for what they were going to face when they graduated. And to me, there was, like I said, when they came to my office and just wanted to talk, to me that was the best part. of the teaching for me. And coaching is a lot like that. It's not just teaching somebody how to play baseball. Okay, it's about the life lessons that go into it. And I think it's for children who go into sports, and dad takes on that coach role. I always knew there would come a time where I didn't want to coach you anymore. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want you to ever have the stigma that, you're playing because your dad's the coach kind of thing. Okay. Again, like being out on I wanted you to do it on your own. I wanted you to, your own merits to carry you wherever they were going to carry you. So for me, I think one of the, I'll just pick two moments. So for me, one of the greatest thrills for me was being able to go to Cuba with you and your team, and just seeing what baseball meant to those kids and the fans.
Fans were an amazing experience. I was like playing in the World Series.
Yeah. For those on the podcast who can't appreciate it, Cuba, is a communist country, and the poverty level is high. Okay, I mean, it's until you see it, all you see is pictures of Havana and the nightlife, and it looks great and it looks okay. It's not like that. Okay, it's not. The kids were all congregating in the center of town because it's the only place you could get internet. Okay, because they're not allowed to have it in their homes and things like that. So they're like pirating off businesses and things like that. So it's and we went into some of these like towns to play, and just poverty and just the camaraderie that baseball brought all you kids together, and the way after the games that you and the other teams were exchanging hats and shirts and all of that. And I will never, ever forget. Last game we play, the one guy is asking, hey, the bus driver, his son, does anybody have a glove for his son? Does anybody have a glove? And you coming up to me and say, Dad, I know this is a pretty new glove, but do you mind if I give it to the bus driver? And I was like, no, you absolutely, that's fine. You go do that. So you run over to the guy, you tell him, and he's like, great. Let me go tell him. I want you to give it to him and everything. And I remember the bus driver just giving you the biggest hug. He was crying, put that glove up on the dashboard the whole time, driving home with that glove there that he knew he was going to give to his son. So, that is probably one of my just fondest memories of being, and I wasn't coaching then, okay? I was just there as a fan. But watching you, coaching you, so many memories. I don't know that I can pick just one memory out of all the coaching memories that I have of you. But I will tell you that one of my favorite coaching memories of all time was when we were at Berkshire and I was coaching the 12-year-olds and you were playing in the 14-year-olds. And, I arranged for everybody to get the Lehigh Valley bats. And the one kid on the team struck out, angrily smashed the bat down, and everybody could hear it crack. You could just hear it. And he comes over, he's crying, sits on the bench. I sit down next to him and I tell him, you know what this means, right? And he goes, yeah, I'm on the bench. And I said, yep. Why you're on the bench? He said, yeah, because I slammed my bat down as I was angry. And I said, so who's benching you? And he said, I am. And I said, okay, as long as we're clear on that. And then the dad came over and started just berating the kid. And I pulled the dad aside and I said, look, I'm not going to tell you how to parent. I'm not going to do that. Just let me say he feels bad enough. He knows what he did is wrong. Okay? Don't humiliate him in front of his friends. Just wait till you get him home, and then you can parent him any way you want, but just lay off right now. Okay? He's sitting there crying as it is. He's already in bad shape. And the dad did. The dad backed off. The dad went and sat down and quieted down about it and everything. Now, I don't know what happened when I got home. I don't know, but it was really nice that, in that moment, the 12-year-old boy completely understood what he had done was wrong. And for those people listening, I had talks with the parents, and everybody knew, the kids all knew what the rules were. Okay. As long as you hustled, as long as you did what you were supposed to do, you were playing. If you threw a helmet, if you threw a glove, if you threw a bat, you were on the bench because there just wasn't any place for that. And I tried to teach them that. I tried to teach them sportsmanship. And you played baseball for so long. The life lessons that baseball teaches are just, they're endless. They're phenomenal for those who play and really get it. So those are some of the really big highlights from my teaching and coaching careers.
Yeah, that's an amazing moment right there with that young kid. I'm sure he probably can remember that to this day. I can remember a lot of times when, either I messed up or did something that resulted in a benching or, stern talking to with the coach, whether it was you or somebody else. And those memories stick with you and it helps shape you into a better person, better ball player, better man. So those are really valuable. And the Cuba trip, we could talk about that for hours. I mean, how about 13 of us going out, all getting multiple things to eat and drink and everything like that, and the whole bill is like $120. Like, that's a bill for two people nowadays in the U.S. for a dinner. Not even a super nice one. So, yeah, that trip was amazing. Really enjoyed that. But I feel like you have my script in a way, the way you're almost like teeing up for like the next question. It's like, man,
But I
does he
don't. For
does he
those
know
listening,
something? But
this
no,
was completely unscripted. I have no idea what he's going to ask.
you mentioned the life lessons with baseball, and that's the whole reason I'm wearing this jersey for those who are watching online. This is my dad's semi-pro jersey, at least one of them. But wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and about that experience and what it was like playing semi-professional baseball. I know it's an absolute grind, kind of going from college to semi-pro, and then deciding to hang up the cleats and pursue a different route in life.
Yeah, well, so I took a very circuitous path. I, I, how do I say this? I didn't have a lot of self confidence as a young teenager, as a young man, and I think part of that was due to the fact that I didn't have the close relationship with my dad growing up that I like to think we had. Now, for those listening, I got very close to my dad after I moved out of the house. Things changed dramatically once I was gone and I was out of the house. Things got a lot better between us, and they were great right up until the point where we lost them. But I didn't have that confidence, and I really wish I had listened to my high school coach. I remember my high school coach once coming out to the mound. I was a pitcher, for those who don't know. He comes out to the mound one day, and he says, and I was the number 2 pitcher on the varsity as a junior. I had one senior ahead of me, and then I was ahead of all the other seniors on the team. But he comes out the one day and he says to me, the only reason you're not number 1 is because you don't have the confidence that John has. You have better stuff than he does, but he walks out here thinking he's going to win every game. You don't. And it took a while for that to catch up to me. I mean, even in college, it didn't really resonate. I was a 4-year starter on the varsity. Again, as a freshman, you start out, you're low man on the totem pole. Midway through my freshman year, I was the number 2 pitcher on the varsity team. The only kid who was ahead of me was a junior. He was 2 years ahead of me, and he was number 1. It took a while for that confidence to kick in. And how it kicked in for me was, so I went to a walk-on Phillies tryout at Frankfurt High School in Philadelphia, which happened to be Pop Pop's high school, by the way. So
Wow,
it was kind
I
of
didn't know that.
nostalgic for Dad. And for those who don't know, this is something that most of the major league teams do. They have these walk-on tryouts all the time. And everybody runs a 60-yard dash, and then they put all the infielders at shortstop and they hit ground balls, and they hit fungos to the outfielders. And the pitchers, you get like 6-7 pitches to show what you can do. That's it. And then they ask, after watching everybody, they ask a certain amount of players to stay, and then they play a game. Everybody else goes home. And that day, they had all the catchers line up against the outfield fence, and the pitchers threw again off the outfield grass to the catcher. And I remember looking at the Philly scout saying, can we throw off the mound? I'll throw 20 miles an hour faster off the mound. I'm just not going to do it here on flat ground. And he says, no, you just have to do the best you can here. So I threw my 6, 7 pitches, got sent home, and I was like, okay, great. End of story. About a month later, I'm playing in an adult baseball league. It's more like a beer league, but it's not softball. It's adult baseball. Okay, so yay. Okay, I'm having fun. I'm having a great time playing with a great group of guys. And the Orioles are having a local tryout. In fact, they're playing at my high school arch rival field. So it's a field I'm really familiar with. I know it really well and everything. And my dad and my coach are trying to get me to go. And I'm like, nope, not happening. Not going to do it. I'm not going through that mess again. So the night before, because the pressure was relentless, I just got to tell you. So the night before, I look at them and I say, okay, we'll go. And I'm going to walk right up to the scouts and ask them where the pitchers throw. If they stay in the outfield, I get in the car and go home. If they stay off the mound, we stay. And they're like, fair enough. So I get out of the car, 4 guys with their nice white Orioles uniforms on. I walk up to them and I say, hi, I'm here to try out for pitching. And they're like, yeah, we have to register. I said, yeah, I've been through this before. I said, I have to ask you a question first. When you evaluate the pitchers, do we throw off the mound or do we throw in the outfield? And they kind of looked at each other, looked at me like I had like 5 heads or something, and said, no, you throw off the mound. And I'm like, okay. I said, just had to ask because let's just say one of your competitors doesn't think that pitchers should throw off the mound when they evaluate them. So I knew as I walked over to register, I had a big target on my back, right? Okay. So I actually threw my 6, 7 pitches, got asked to stay, got asked to start, threw 2 innings, 2 of the best innings I've ever thrown. They clocked me that day at 98 miles an hour, which you have to remember, this is mid-'80s. And
Yep.
if your name's not Nolan Ryan or J.R. Richard, there's nobody in the majors throwing like that.
Yep.
So I really wowed them. I got done my 2 innings. I'm sitting there on the fence. Guy came over and said he wanted to talk to me, so I go over and talk to them. They want me to come down for Baltimore for additional workouts, et cetera, et cetera. But they wanted me to stop playing where I was, and they introduced me to this guy. His name was Dick Noe, and he was playing for Northampton. Dick Noe was kind of like the poster child of what if. He made it to AAA with the New York Mets in the late 60s and could not crack the lineup of Tom Seaver, John Matlack, Nolan Ryan, Jerry Koosman, Gary Gentry. Couldn't crack that lineup. So they released him, and the Orioles picked him up in the 70s. They had Jim Palmer, Mike Cuellar, Pat Dobson, and Dave McNally. They had 4 20-game winners, the last team to do that, in the same season. Couldn't crack the starting list. The guy was just stuck in AAA. But he got me a tryout with Northampton in the Rancocas Valley League, semi-pro. And funny thing is, they had me try out on the sideline. Coach says, yeah, we'll give you a uniform. Come the next game, blah, blah, blah. Come the next game. Sit on the bench for like 3 games. I'm like, what am I doing here? I'm going to go back to my other team. At least I can play. And we're getting killed. And they put me in for mop-up duty. And I just start striking guys out left and right. And I coming off the field, and the 2 coaches come to meet me. I'm not even into the dugout. I come off the field, and they're like, where the hell did you learn to throw like that? I said, I always could throw like that. They're like, you didn't throw like that when you tried out. I said, you didn't put me on the pitching mound. And they were like, oh, my gosh. So instantly vaulted to number 2 in the rotation, just on that one thing. The guy who was ahead of me, again, didn't throw as hard as I did, but he had been in the league like 5 years, knew all the hitters and everything. And that's what you find out. The league was a really tough league back then, full of guys who had made it to AA, AAA, single A, all kinds of guys who had been there. And so it was a really tough, really competitive league. And you learn, even when you can throw that hard, that I had my one nemesis, if he ever listens, his name was Jim Filati. He played on one of the opposing teams, and we had this love-hate relationship. I swear, the guy either hit a home run off me or I struck him out. I mean, and I don't mean like barely. I mean just Titanic moonshot home runs. I mean, it was just the way it was, and you can't just rear back and fire. They will hit it. And that's, I think the lesson you learn is that it takes time to learn how to throw to good hitters. You really need to set them up if you want to strike them out. Yes, there are those weak hitters where you're throwing 98, they're not going to touch it, and you know who they are, and you're crazy. And you and I, we watch games. Why are they throwing a changeup there? Why are they throwing off speed? The guy can't touch the fastball. Just throw him 3 fastballs, strike him out, and say, sit down, okay? Get out of here, okay? I don't understand why major league pitchers don't do that, because there are guys that just can't catch up to that fastball. So why you give them a chance to catch up to anything else is just ridiculous. But yeah, I that's how I ended up starting semi-pro, and I played till I was 38. So it's just, job, kids, it's like the Moneyball when they tell we all find out that we can't play the kids' game. Some of us find out early, so we can't outrun the clock. You just reach a point where you just can't. The mind knows what you need to do, but the body's just not going to respond the way it used to, and you don't heal as fast. So.
Yeah, it's that Rocky quote: "Father times undefeated takes out everyone." So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, I'm sure all that journeying and going through that process taught you a lot of adversity, taught you a lot of handling challenges, dealing with different people, and just preparingness and everything like that. So definitely helped teach me a lot about the sport, and I'm sure you taught a lot of other guys how to pitch and how to throw a slider and everything like that. Because like you said, back then, nobody threw 98. Nobody had your type of slider. Nobody did anything like that. Now it's like everybody does that. So, yeah, it's a really interesting career path. And like we always say, everything happens for a reason. And we're here now. So as we begin to wrap up here, I ask everybody I have on as a guest these 2 questions or 2 points here. So the first one, real simple: are you happy today?
Yes, I am very content where I am. I'm happy with my life journey. I don't have any regrets about things. I mean, hindsight's always 2020. You can always look back and say, "Oh, like you said it last week." Well, if I know, right? Okay, if I knew now what I knew then, you would have done things differently. But that's part of your journey. That's everybody has to go through that. And I think regret is a wasted emotion. You can't look back and say, "What if? What could have been?" Okay. Are there things I miss? Sure. There's things that I miss. There's things I wish I might have done differently, but I don't regret anything. And I am very, very happy where I am right now in my life. I'm at a good spot with Mom, with everything. I think everything's really good.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd be a little surprised if you weren't, but always good to ask. And then this last part, this is really for you. If there's any other fatherly advice on this Father's Day that we didn't really cover, or is there anything you would like to mention before we close things out here?
Yeah, I lost my mom very unexpectedly, and I lost my dad very unexpectedly. Now, I lost my mom. She was only 44. I was a senior in college when she passed. And Pop did not die of COVID, but he died during COVID, and the way that was all handled and everything. I would just tell you, for everybody who may not quite have the relationship they want with their parents, it's never too late. It's never too late. Call them. Pick up the phone. Don't just send them a text message. Don't write them a letter. Call them. Talk to them. Go visit them if you're close enough. Whatever differences, go back to the beginning, what we were talking about, whatever differences you had, you agreed to disagree. Okay. Maybe you still don't see eye to eye on whatever that issue is. Don't talk about that issue, but your parents are not going to be there forever. And you will, I think, maybe you just absolutely despise your parents and you want them gone out of your life. I don't know, but I think one day you'll look back and regret that you didn't make that call when you could have made that call. And now you can't make that call because they're not there. So that's what I would say. And for the dads out there, I would say, the reverse is true. If you don't have the relationship you wanted to have or would like to have with your kid, it's never too late to fix it. Okay. But somebody's got to be willing to reach out and do that. So kids, call your dad. Dads, call your kids. So
Pulling on the heartstrings there.
yeah.
That's why
Well,
they call you Dr. Chroscinski, He's got all of this knowledge stored up. So, well, really appreciate you coming on, Dad. I think you hit the nail on the head with a lot of this advice. I hope everybody appreciated it. I certainly did. And it was great being able to have you on here as a guest. So, really thank you for that.
well, thank you for having me, and happy Father's Day to all the dads out there.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day to all the dads. If you haven't called your dad, just like Dr. C just said, pick up the phone and call him. They'll want to hear from you no matter the stage of your relationship. So go do that. And while you're at it, feel free to check out the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, all at Drafted Pages. New episode comes out every Saturday, and we look forward to seeing you next week.